So No Guns Life concludes with episode 12 as we wait for that second season, which will be coming out in April, so the spring season of next year. And I have to say, this was a refreshing and enjoyable episode that definitely didn't go in as much of a horror direction as I guess the little glimpse that we did get last week made me believe, but it was still a very enjoyable episode, even though it was pretty predictable that this whole butler situation was going to be the guy who was behind the whole haunting. It actually did present some interesting twists and turns, especially by what Juzo got as a reward, which, based on whatever the hell is in that, with the information that it has, now that we have this little hand extended that's going to be tagging along with the crew, I definitely think the second half of this story is going to open up and probably spiral out of control in the best possible direction and way. So I'm really excited for the second half of this story, I have to say, while actually being very impressed with how they decide to wrap up this first half by doing something that was very different while maybe being a little predictable but still having its own unique flair. So I can definitely say I was a happy camper walking out of this episode. I think the idea of just the worlds of extendeds in No Guns Life is so interesting, and we haven't seen too many people really push against extendeds to the point that I think people would. Just to see characters of all shapes and sizes and manufacturers, it would be, I would think there'd be some racism, there'd be some prejudice against people looking like this when it really is inhuman. I definitely know I wouldn't want to do anything like this if I was put into this world. I would not want to modify my body to this degree. I would never get plastic surgery, so it's just nothing that I would ever want. So I would naturally think there should be people pushing against it more than we've seen, and to have a girl who lost her parents blames extendeds because this hand came crashing down, and the only person who's really took care of her was this one older guy who, clearly was shady as hell, but as a broken girl, clearly wouldn't recognize that. I thought it was really interesting, especially seen by how Juzo was brought in. He looks like a giant revolver. His literal head is made for killing. It's understandable why this girl would, want to push the hell away against him, and pretty much anyone who isn't, at the very least, human by appearance. So it was really fun to see how Juzo kind of handled that situation, and how just this girl really represented a side of humanity in this world that we haven't seen enough of, in my honest opinion. So it was really nice to end the first half of this anime saying, hey, we're gonna show you that even though there's been some trouble, there's been some poking of hey, this guy has a gun for his head, or hey, not everyone agrees with the extended way of life. It was really nice to see just a pretty normal girl in comparison really terrified at what the hell we were seeing. We can look back at Army and just he had a crowd of people chanting his name and he did not look human. In comparison, it definitely seems like there's more people willing to walk down the same street as an extended. Maybe they'll give them a side eye, but they won't throw flowers in his face, things like that. So it was really interesting to see how it was really trying to represent this really complex side of humanity, and how, extendeds definitely have it rough, just ignoring what they have to live with. So it was really cool to see how it was building up to this almost horror-esque sequence where you're oh, there's footsteps on the ground, there's this weird hand coming around, and just nice to see how Juzo immediately shut it down. I was really glad he didn't buy into the whole there was a haunted ghost or something, but really recognized this man is clearly playing me for a fool, and just calls the entire situation out, while also understanding that this girl has no reason to trust a revolver or the person that she's been with for quite some time. But the fact that neither one of them were idiots, she took the gun, made sure to say, hey, I don't trust you, but I also don't trust a revolver, and how Juzo just kind of played that entire scene. It definitely didn't feel like things were just happening for the sake of convenience, but rather the characters actually acted in pretty believable ways based on their circumstances and what their past have kind of led them to do. The most shocking thing, though, I'd have to say about the entire episode, you can see the betrayal coming, but the idea of the extended hands, I actually thought were part of this man's plan, and how he was using them to freak out this girl so it would appear like there was a ghost. But it kind of seems like either the father or the mother, they hired this extended to be a bodyguard, or potentially they made it or something like that. So it was actually kind of clever, and really it gave you that twist you didn't see coming, because I think most of us probably can say yeah, we understood who was going to be the betrayal here. We knew there wasn't going to be a real ghost, but they were directing it at the very beginning to make us seem oh, there's actually something happening, to then immediately being oh no, all the people quit and only you're left around here, and you're trying to say oh, maybe there's something your father left behind. It's no, you're a shady bastard. But so to have a couple of things that we didn't see coming, the idea of the reward, which was kind of locked in that pendant, which obviously is going to play a crucial part to the second half of the story here, the second half of the anime. And then of course we have the whole idea that the hands were actually pretty good people, and now they're going to be tagging along with Juzo's crew, probably because he has that little memory stick thing. So I imagine that's why he's kind of tagging along, to make sure it stays in the right hands or something like that. But still, it was nice to how it kind of felt very predictable while also having unpredictable elements that we weren't keeping our focus on. So the things that, it was trying to be like, ooh, it's all spooky, we're like, no, it's not. You guys aren't fooling anyone. But then in the back corners of the anime, they were setting up some pretty interesting twists and turns, and I love it when an anime does that. It gives you the unpredictable without even realizing that it was there all along, because you're like, man, they're trying to make it seem all, mysterious, like something crazy is gonna happen, but really nothing crazy is gonna happen. They're like, oh shit, actually something crazy did happen. I appreciate that. It was really fun, especially when you got like the last few minutes of the episode where they kind of went really cinematic with it. You got just our girl's face just kind of blowing in the wind because you got this amazing motorcycle. It was just like, it wasn't like a big conflict, but rather like it was that epic conclusion to like a movie in a lot of ways, where you just like know everything's gonna work out, but you get that extra little crisp details of the movie production, and I love it, I have to say. It's just something that you gotta appreciate with No Gun Slave, where you have a character like Juzo, who is such a nice guy. He really wants to be friends with everyone, but he knows like he doesn't look human, so no one's gonna want to be his friends. So he'll act like, oh, I'm gonna take this as a reward. I'm a big tough guy. I'm an asshole. But really, he just didn't want this girl to be a target anymore, while also giving us a reason to say, oh man, the next core of this anime in spring is gonna be insane now that he has some secret memories that maybe will unlock some conspiracies with this whole organization that's been ruining our life. It's like, that's how you know No Gun's Life went out with a bang, and like I've been saying, it's a damn shame this wasn't more popular. Like, obviously I understand when you don't have cute anime characters or you're not set in high school, it's not gonna blow up the same way it typically does, because, well, we're looking at, No Gun's Life. We got revolvers for heads and we got machines. It's not cutesy, it's not as marketable to just the general masses, but damn, was this a good, enjoyable show. And I really like how it definitely, like, with each episode, it almost picked up more and more to say, like, hey, even if you have, like, a little gimmick, a little quirk that you enjoyed with this anime, it's definitely going to be more than that. And they just kept exploring the world, more characters, more world development. And by the time episode 12 concludes, you think to yourself, No Gun Slave has an incredibly interesting setting, interesting narrative that it can explore, but most importantly, the characters, for as inhuman as they look, feel so human in design. And that's how you know it's doing something amazing. In a lot of ways, the less human a character looks, the more human you can actually write them to be. Whether it be a Monster Girls, whether it be an animal like in Beastars, or whether you have machine-looking characters. You can write the characters to have such human and raw emotions because you're not really looking at them appearing like, oh, it's just a normal human, so you just say, oh, why is this an issue, or things like that. But here, you look at a revolver and you understand why he gets those side eyes, why he gets pushed away, despite us knowing he's actually a pretty decent guy overall. He just has an addiction to cigarettes. I will say, though, when I was watching this episode, in a lot of ways, until like the last 5 minutes, it wasn't really feeling like a final episode, and even though it was pretty much confirmed, I think, ever since episode 1 dropped, that it was going to be a split core, it'd be 24 episodes at the very least. So a lot of times you don't end in a way that it feels like an ending, but rather you're like, okay, we know we have more, so we just have to wait a few months. For a good while, it did feel like a good episode of No Gun Slave, but I was wondering, I don't know how they want to end this episode, because clearly they're gonna do more. They're not gonna like wrap up a big narrative. This is clearly just a story of the week. It's not gonna do too much. But then once you get that punchline with the pendant, and then you see how they kind of direct it in this almost cinematic experience, I have to say this episode really turned around for me, where I was enjoying it from minute 1. I thought the first 15 minutes really solid. But I'll be honest, it didn't really feel like an end episode. But then, kind of similar to how the extended was actually on the girl's side, they really did surprise me with how that whole little pendant that they were looking for turned out to be something larger for the next core of this anime. And like, I always appreciate when an anime can make you feel like you understand what it's doing, whether that be a twist, whether that be a predictable betrayal, or whether that be something like you didn't really think that this episode was going to connect to the actual main story. Like, I could probably expect a lot of people will agree with me that for most of this episode, it felt like a good story, but it didn't feel like a main story. It felt like, unfortunately, people would call stuff like that filler, or they would just say it wasn't really all that important, but it was enjoyable for what it was. But then you see how it actually did connect to the main story, and then it changes your entire opinion of the episode overall. Like, for me, I loved the episode. I thought it was great from minute 1, but once I saw how it was actually connecting to the main story all along, it actually turned into a really exceptional episode that I look back even more fondly of. And those are the kinds of episodes that, whether people hated the episode at first and then turned around and said, oh, wait, I actually did love this. Or you're like me, you're like, this was a great episode, but now I think it's actually kind of exceptional because they actually incorporated it into the main story, giving us a reason to foam at the mouth wanting that second half of the anime. Not many stories, I think, stick the landing for a split core because you really have to keep the excitement up, and for an anime that, at least in the West, isn't getting as hyped up as many, you gotta give something for the masses to kind of latch onto and say, holy shit, you know, there's gonna be a lot of great anime in spring, but we also gotta make sure we don't sleep on No Gun Slave. And I think they stuck their landing. I think they did something that really impressed me overall by being different, but also familiar with what we've come to kind of expect with this wonderful anime, or so I think. No Gun Slave definitely turned out to be something really, really fun, and I can't wait to see where episode 13 through 24 is going to go when we do get that in spring there. But as always, I'd be interested in hearing, what did you think of this horror-esque episode that kind of turned into not so much of a horror, but still ended up kind of landing its 2 feet, or at least so I thought. Whatever you're feeling, do let me know. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.